It came almost out of terror from Bruce Beresford. It was the very first opera he had ever seen back in Sydney 40-some-odd years ago. And it became his favorite. He has this thing about Rigoletto. He sees it wherever he can. He'd run to Covent Garden or whatnot and see it. And when Mr. Hemmings invited him to do a new production in Los Angeles, he was very excited because he got to do his favorite opera and everything. And as he was preparing with it, you know, you get your score out and you turn to page one and you try to think, well, where do I start? What am I going to do? And he totally froze up. I mean, he just thought, oh my God, I can't do this. It's such a perfect opera. And I can't stage it. I can't come up with any ideas. And he was talking with a friend of his, John Stoddard, who's the set designer. And John just kind of humorously said, well, why don't you update it? You know, set it in Hollywood. And Bruce said, no, I'd rather not, because I don't like updating operas. I mean, it never works. It always kind of distracts from the storytelling or whatnot. And as he thought about it, he ended up in Hollywood going to some kind of gala screening or opening or whatnot. And at the party afterwards, he was up at some palatial thing in Bel Air, you know, some producer's house. And he was looking around and he thought, God, all these people, these like corporate executives, and they're all kissing up to this producer, and they're absolute yes men. It's, good heavens, this is like a 20th century court. And the producer is like a duke. And then it just kind of like the penny dropped, and he thought, well, maybe it would. So he went back to his studio and started thinking about it and kind of coming up with the idea as well, okay, if the Duke is going to be Duke Mantua, Hollywood film mogul, Rigoletto, let's see, he's the most hated person, and who's the most hated person in Hollywood? Oh, agents, obviously. Okay, so he'll be an agent. And he just then plugged it all the way down the line. And to make it very kind of Hollywood and beautiful and glamorous, to make up for the fact that it's not 16th century court, we wanted it as lavishly beautiful as possible. And so all the costumes were from Armani. They got LA Eye Works to donate, you know, $250 a pair of sunglasses for all these people. And it's just very elegant and very lovely, and still true to the story. The Duke of Mantua has become Duke Mantua. Rigoletto, who is usually a buffoon, kind of the court jester, is the agent, which is almost the court jester in contemporary Hollywood. Borsa, Marullo, Ceprano are courtiers, and that just means they're hangers-on, people that kind of always want to kiss up to the big head guy. Gilda is the daughter. I mean, the basic story of the relationship between father and daughter, which is very special in Verdi to begin with. Rigoletto's, for 16 or some odd years, sent his daughter away to get her out of the area, basically away from Duke Mantua, because the Duke is a famous womanizer, and Rigoletto, the only thing he has left in life is his daughter. And so she's about 16, and she's coming home, meeting up with her father basically for the first time. And the Duke, having chased 2 or 3 women already in the first scene of the first act, decides that he's going to make the moves on Gilda. And he disguises himself as a poor student, and the two have a lovely love duet, and everything's fine. Unfortunately, Rigoletto finds out about it, and he sets out to have the Duke killed. And I mean, it's just such a frightening thing in the final act when Gilda, he thinks, has gone off to Verona or wherever, and he's organized the murder, the assassination of the Duke. And at the very last minute, just as he's about to throw the body into the water, you hear the Duke singing his little tune off stage. And Rigoletto realizes that it's his own daughter that's sacrificed herself for this absolute schmuck. I mean, there's a very strange relationship there. We're not quite sure why she's willing to go so far. Ostensibly, she sacrifices herself to save her father, because at some point the assassins think, well, if we're not going to kill the Duke, perhaps we'll kill the jester instead. So the initial motivation is to save her father. But she does come back and she says, you know, I don't know why I've come back here, because I see that the Duke has betrayed me, and yet I still love him, and I can't help it. I said to everybody when I collected the cast the very first day, I said, you know, Bruce's #1 concern was to strip away operatic tendencies, big gestures, hands, facial things that are odd, walking backwards, adjusting for colleagues so everyone can always sing downstage. I mean, things that you don't even realize that one does anymore. And he kept saying in rehearsal over and over, stop that, don't do that. People don't do that in real life, don't do that. And so I said to the cast, my job is to emphasize the naturalness of what this is to be. Part of the thing that makes my job so much easier is when singers think, and when they have the capacity to not just say, well, I don't do it that way. Both Mark and Maureen have done these roles for many, many years, and both of them have been very open, and Mark in particular, because what he's doing in this updated Rigoletto thought is very, very different from what he's ever done before.
Good. Everything's okay.
Everything's brilliant. I mean, it's like, we have another hour, what do? We go shopping.
I've learned more about the inner works of the character, about what a father goes through. I remember the first time a young man came to our house to date my sister, and my father was extremely concerned, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, he's just a guy. What's he going to do? And my father had these images of several bad things that could happen to her, and wanting to go out with her and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't until later on that I came to grips with that feeling. I have a wonderful stepdaughter who is just fantastic, and she is dating a very nice man now, but when she first started dating, we were both sitting there on pins and needles. And so you begin to think more about what Rigoletto must have gone through, especially at the time. The biggest part that I learned the difference of is the fact that since he was a hunchback, he didn't have any way out. He couldn't. You didn't have any options. He couldn't run for president. And up until, I'd say, even in this country, up until the 50s, it was still considered somewhat of a bad thing to be handicapped. We have since learned and created ramps and things like that for people to get around. Rigoletto didn't have any of that, and he didn't have the ability to gain any of that without the assistance of someone else, so he needed someone else. But I also have learned that he was incredibly intelligent, and he could use that part, that intelligence that nobody considered a hunchback would have, to get what he needed to get what he wanted to get, until the daughter shows up again, and then he has to reconsider all that, and his mind goes left to somewhere else, and he loses all consciousness of reality and does everything wrong after that. You still have the hump, which is, of course, great. The difference in this production is that he is clubfoot, which was a little unusual for me, even. And I'm slowly adapting to that because you have this arm crutch. I try to use it as an extension of my own arm, as a weapon in some ways, to fend off certain people. Marino film, of course, has got to be one of the most fantastic Gildas I've ever seen. We actually did Rigoletto together some 10 years ago.
The first time I did Gilda was in 1985, and it was only my second professional job, and it was as a result of somebody canceling. So I had only 3 days to learn the role. And ignorance and youth are bliss, because I had no clue that it was difficult. All I knew is that I had a role to learn, I had notes to learn, I had words to learn, and being young and enthusiastic, and in that point in my career when I thought I can do anything, I can sing anything, I can memorize anything, I did it. And it's really carried me through with this role very well, because I have and can, I hope, sing this under any circumstances. And it's also the role I've done the most, which has given me a great opportunity to grow in the role. First of all, and just by virtue of life experience. One would think that playing a 16-year-old version one needed to be 16 years old, or a little bit closer than I am certainly at this point in age. But even the older that I get, the more I understand about her character and her youth, her circumstances. People often ask me, you know, how can you play Gilda? She's such a silly character, and I know it's often received that way, but I think she's a noble, bright spirit that touches the world and her people around her for a very short time. And I don't think it's a stretch that what she does is fall in love with a bad guy and then kill herself for him. I mean, this happens all the time. Kids make mistakes. But in her circumstances, I think it was also, she was saving her father's life as well. She was saving her father from being a murderer. And she was a ruined woman in that time period. By that time, she'd been with the Duke for a month. Sure, clearly, she was probably pregnant. She was not ever going to have a life that was what her father had hoped for her, certainly. So I don't think she had much choice. I think she's a joy to play. Can you tell? The character of Gilda does indeed have a tremendous arc of growth, both vocally and dramatically. And what I've found is the necessary ingredient to make that work is to just get out of the way, because it's all there. It's in the text, it's by far in the music. And because of the drama that takes place, it's a natural progression. She meets and falls in love with a man. I mean, that first blush of love, that innocence discovered and lost, then the real innocence lost in Act 2, also discovers what her father is in Act 2, somewhat disobeys him in Act 2, and then by Act 3 she's been a woman for a month physically and has certainly lost a great deal of her innocence. Vocally, all one needs to do to make that apparent is to sing Verdi's music. I don't think updating a production should or does change the essential characters. The thing that I'm finding a little bit interesting is having to change my walk, change some of my hand gestures to make them more 20th, 21st century. Really all that's changed is the costumes. We're singing the same words, it's the same emotions, nothing's changed.
Frank, on the other hand, has never done Duke before, and certainly he has an idea. He's incredibly well prepared, and he knows what the piece is about and who the person is. But he's complete tabula rasa. You know, fine. You just tell me, sure. I'll wear our money suits. You know, button down the shirt. Fantastic. No worries.
Approaching any role for the first time is, you know, always like getting to know a stranger. You take a look at him from a distance and you have some ideas about what it's going to be like, but you actually begin the conversation and get to know this stranger or this role, and you find that they contain things you never thought they would, that things that you thought were going to be a breeze are just like pulling teeth, and that things that you thought were going to be like pulling teeth are the easiest thing that you were introduced to. So it's always an exciting process, but always surprising. I believe the Duke is a womanizing jerk. That's really pretty much what he is, especially in this production. It takes a pretty short shot at the producer stereotype. So to give him too much heart makes him a lot less interesting. And if the Duke wasn't a schmuck, would you really care about the show as much? I mean, you need somebody causing trouble. So yeah, I do believe he's pretty much a jerk. I mean, he's human like the rest of us. I'm sure he states in Parmi that you know, this beautiful, innocent woman who almost made me believe in constancy. So he has his definite limitations as far as being human. Parmi is the one aria that dramatically people have questions about. And you do have to make choices about who your character is, why he would suddenly seem so real and so honest and so open. The director and I talked about this a little bit. It's one of these moments in opera that you run across occasionally where you go, gee, I don't know if that really makes sense. But the music's so darn good, we're going to sing it anyway. the justification that we've come across in this is that he is a movie maker. And he starts off, "Ella mi fu rapita." He's ticked that anybody would do this to him. You know, how dare they? I'm the most powerful man in Hollywood. And his ego starts to drop away, and he starts to fall into, wouldn't this maybe make a great storyline for a film? And he has this little moment where he kind of, it's real, but it's also kind of his own line of, I'm really a nice guy. I don't know why people don't like me. I'm honest, I'm truthful, nah. You know, it's one of those odd moments that you have to kind of reach a little bit dramatically with your character, but it does work, I think. And I've really actually been very much enjoying the producer aspect of this, that Hollywood thing, babe. Perrier, please. You know, it's been a lot of fun. We've been having a lot of fun clowning around in rehearsal with it. I've got a great job. I would do this rather than anything, and man, I'm just one of the luckiest men in the world to be doing it.
I've not worked with Karen Keltner before, and it's a great joy. She loves this music. She loves the characters. She has tremendous respect for the piece as a great work of art, and that right there is more than half the battle.
This score of Rigoletto by Verdi, I think, shows us Verdi exposed. I keep putting it with Traviata. To me, those two are the most humanly accessible to people we know. Certainly, Rigoletto, when it was conceived, was written about a court jester of the, 15th century or something. In our production, it's a little bit different perspective. But it really doesn't matter of the time set. What matters are the relationships and the humanity of the individuals delineated by this music. And I find that as a conductor specifically, and as a musician generally, that this music just touches my heart utterly. I think it's because Verdi used the orchestra and, of course, his singers to explore and plumb the depths of the personalities and the characters of these individuals. He was a creator. He was not a musicological person. He was not a person who wanted to make a point about composition. He was creating what he was wanting to express. And in doing that, in Rigoletto, for the first time, he was creating something that broke the bounds of the Italian formal setting of opera to that point. We don't know exactly what he's going to do next or in what proportions. The proportions are all different, but they fit the piece so naturally. And of course, he was working with what I believe he considered to be one of the most satisfying, dramatic concoctions, which was the libretto of Piave and the story of Le Roi s'amuse by Hugo, which was the basis for Rigoletto in the first place. So for many, many reasons, I think Verdi was reveling in what he was creating at the time and doing it quite naturally and quite in the manner of his genius, which was not to be pedantic, not to be trying to make a statement compositionally, but simply to be honest to the story he felt so deeply.
One of my crucial critics is my mother, who's, I mean, she's not really conservative in a way, but she likes things the way she likes them, and the way she's accustomed to them. And I asked her to come see this Rigoletto because I thought it was really, really exciting in stripping away the traditions and showing the piece, just really telling the story very simply and very directly. It made me love the piece even more. And I asked my mom to come see it, and she was totally against it, and she was ready to say her rumph, you know, already during the overture when there's this film running. And after it was over, she said, "Oh my God, it's brilliant." She said, "It's such a modern piece. I mean, the way these people react to each other, it's as if it were written yesterday." And I thought, yeah, it's strange to think that 400 years ago, people still pretty much behave the way we do today. And the text is very modern, the Italian. And I think if you see this version, you will suddenly understand the drama of La Donna Immobile and not just listen to the stupid tune. Because I think you'll get really wrapped up into it and caught up into the action of these people.
Oh, perhaps the most human of all the composers. There is something about Verdi's music that speaks to the gamut of emotions. And the more I sing, the more I discover. It's a fascinating ride.